Space, the final frontier. This is the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. Its mission to explore the solar system, to seek out new observations and data, to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. And now the host of the Observer's Notebook, Tim Robertson.
Hello and welcome to episode 127 of the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. I'm Tim Robertson, the host of the Observer's Notebook and also the coordinator of the training program within the ALPO. Thanks for downloading and listening. The ALPO collects and analyzes observations of various solar system bodies and associated phenomenon, and publishes detailed reports concerning these bodies in its quarterly publication, the Journal of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers, also known as the Strolling Astronomer. Podcast depends upon donations from you, our listeners, to keep it alive. If you enjoy what you hear on the podcast, you can donate to it via Patreon. You can give as little as $1 a month. If you feel even more generous, for $5, you receive early access to the podcast before it goes public. For a monthly donation of $10, you receive a copy of the Novice Observer's Handbook. And for $35 a month, you receive producer credits on the podcast. You can find out more by going to www.patreon, that's patreon.com/observersnotebook. If you'd like to join the ALPO, membership begins at only $18 a year. For more information, find us at www.alpo-astronomy.org. And we're also on the Facebook. Just search for ALPO Astronomy. And yes, this podcast also has a Facebook page as well. Just search for Observer's Notebook. And if you enjoy what you hear on the podcast, please subscribe. That way you'll never miss another episode. And now, episode 127. And we're going to learn a little bit about the little planet Mercury. Stay tuned. All right, I'd like to welcome everybody back to this episode of the Observer's Notebook podcast. We have with us today the coordinator of the Mercury Section of the ALPO, Frank Melilo. Welcome to the podcast, Frank.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Okay.
Why don't you just give everybody a little bit of background about yourself before we get started?
Okay, yeah, all right. I'm 63 years old, and I've been interested in astronomy since I was 11 years old, when Apollo 11 went to the moon. And little by little, I started to get interested in astronomy. Then I got my Tasco telescope for my 13th birthday. Tasco 4.5-inch reflector, which I had for 10 years. And then
you started off larger than most of us. Most of us started off with a 60 millimeter refractor.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Most people, yeah. And no, I have a small 40 millimeter refractor. But then I got the 4.5-inch Tasco reflector, and I had it for 10 years. And then I got the Selectron 8-inch telescope. Then I promoted myself to astronomy, and I get more deeply involved, like deep sky observing and planetary observing throughout the 80s. And I've been doing a lot of astrophotography, planetary photography. Using films at that time.
Uh-huh.
You think about today using film, it's like doing the dinosaur age.
I don't know if you can buy film anymore, can you?
Yeah, I don't know how I do with the films. I used to developing myself.
Yeah.
I have a little dark room when I used to live with my parents. Developing films, and because that's the best way to get out of your astrophotography, planetary photography. You have to develop your own films and all.
Right.
And then a little bit later, then I joined a lot of organizations. I joined the ALPO in 1984. AABSO and a couple other amateur organizations. Of course, my local astronomy club, Astronomical Society of Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
And then little by little, I started to get more deeply involved, especially planetary imaging. Then I entered to the world of CCD in 1997. So since that time, and I've been doing a lot of CT imaging, especially planetaries, and a few of the deep sky objects. But my passion is more planetary observing and the imaging. And then in 2001, I became a Mercury coordinator. So I'm still a coordinator since that time, and enjoying being a Mercury coordinator, because that's helped you to learn what you see and to collect observing reports from other people, other members of the ALPO, and I've been doing that ever since. And so, yeah, but just to give a little overview about the Mercury session, I've been doing the annual report every year, and every quarterly of publishing of the ALPO, the solar astronomers. I have my own column when I write about the Mercury session. Anything that's exciting, anything exciting by Mercury, about the observation, and any members that goes out of the way to observe Mercury and make a very interesting observations. Then I write a little bit on the column on the Mercury session report in every issue. Then you have an annual report of the Mercury observation. Yeah, that's about it. And we have few members still observing Mercury and sending observation.
Now Mercury is one of those planets that, I mean, once you can find it, it's easy to observe. But it's also a planet that it takes some hunting, because it's usually fairly close to the sun. And I think, and it's fairly small too. And I think for that reason, it's not the most popular solar system object to observe. But there's a lot going on with Mercury too.
Don't forget, like Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn are pretty well observed, because they're very easy to see them. They're brighter, as you can see, in midnight skies.
Right.
Even Venus is so-so. It gets far enough away from the sun to observe Mercury, observe Venus, during the reasonable hours after sunset or before sunrise. But Mercury is very tricky, because it moves very rapidly. You see one night after sunset, then the next couple of nights it's completely gone. It moves very rapidly. Same thing in the morning sky before sunrise. You may see one morning, and then it just disappeared the next day or two. It moved very rapidly. I like the equipment. Most of the observer, I would suggest to observe Mercury, like if you have a 6 to 10 inch aperture, that's pretty much enough to observe Mercury. But you can observe Mercury like through the binoculars, or a simple refractor like a 2.4 or 3-inch refractor. But if you want to be a little more seriously, if anybody want observe Mercury a little more deeply, I would recommend for like 6 to 10 inches telescope. You don't need a very large telescope to look at Mercury.
Right. Now, when you look at Mercury visually, what do you see?
Visually, it looks like a very tiny moon. It goes through it goes through the phases just like the moon does, from gibbous to half a phase and to crescent phase. It looked like if you observe Mercury in high power, it looked like Venus in low power, and you're able to see this.
Okay.
And don't forget, it's very small. Of course, you need a high magnification to see it clearly.
Yeah. Now, what about surface details? I mean, what type of surface details can you see?
Okay. Surface detail, that's another thing to go by. Like if you have a telescope like 10-inch telescope, you can if the seeing condition is good enough, if it's above average, if you use a red filter will help to increase the contrast. A moderate eyepiece, you don't want it too high, you don't want it too low. A moderate power, according to the telescope you're using. If you if you look at Mercury, especially in the morning apparition, maybe after sunset, if you follow Mercury into the daylight skies, the daylight hours, if you're lucky enough, probably you can even make up the details. I cannot stress enough because regardless, it's very hard to observe anything on the surface of Mercury. But if there is enough contrast, if you're using the red filter, will help increase the contrast, and the contrast against the background appears a little darker, and you can able to concentrate the disc a little more clearly. You may see some maybe like white patches, which is the crater ray craters, ejected ray craters, which appears like a white spot. Yeah, I think in some of the albedo features when you see a light and dark area, but sometimes it's so faint that you don't know if it's there or not. It pop in, you know, it comes and go, and so you know it's very hard to confirm what you really see on Mars, on Mercury.
Yeah, the color filters are really a requirement for observing Mercury.
Yes.
Yeah, same with Venus. I mean, it's you look at Venus without a filter, and it's just like a big light.
Yeah, yeah. Well, with Mercury, the red filter, I think that it's the best because don't forget, if you look in the daytime sky, it will help to darken the blue sky against the background. And
that's true.
Yeah. Then on the surface, it will help to increase the contrast to whatever's visible on the surface, and still it's very, very hard to see.
Okay. Now working in the Mercury section, do you have different types of observing programs that people are involved with?
We have when any of the members send in the application, they say mostly they send in imaging. They use their webcams.
Okay.
When I first started as a Mercury coordinator, a lot of people sent in their drawings, the Dick's drawing. And so as the time progresses, a lot of members got access to the webcam, and with the improved technology, with software and all, they can able to image Mercury a little easier. And using filters, it makes it a little more easier to see Mercury and possible detail on the surface. So lately, I've been getting a lot of images now, more than the drawings.
Okay. All right. And for imaging, are they using different wavelengths of light they're imaging in, or?
Well, the zooming, yeah. Well, you need a high magnification. You need a bottle lens to increase the increase the power. Because Mercury is very, very small. And when I talk about small, I'm talking about maybe 6, 7 to 8 arc second Dick's diameter. So right. Yeah, and you need a high magnification and a good seeing, because you want to observe Mercury as high as possible above the horizon.
Right.
And so that means daylight. So that's a little more. The sky has to be very clear, nice blue, crystal clear sky, and you can really see Mercury really, really clearly. So almost like seeing Venus in low power.
Okay. Now, how many contributors does the section have now?
Okay, as of now, it's on the average about 5.
Okay.
1 year is 5, then another year is 6, 7.
Okay.
Including myself.
So there's obvious need for more observers of the planet Mercury.
Well, unfortunately, observing Mercury, the details and so forth, is not too much of scientific value to it, because the surface now is very well known. Mm-hmm. And thanks to the Messenger spacecraft, now we know what Mercury looked like. We know what the surface look like. Mm-hmm. And so it's not really too much of a scientific observation that you can do with Mercury. You want to see how much detail you can be seen, and you can confirm the detail along with the messenger imaging of the same longitude that visible toward the Earth.
So the messenger spacecraft, it went to Mercury. It's mapped it pretty well. So when you're making your observations, then you have something to compare.
Yes.
Compared to, and that's pretty significant as well as an amateur to be able to say, I actually saw these things.
Yeah, that helps you to confirm what you see,
right?
And whether it's an artifact or real or the real feature, then you have to take a couple more images to see if it's repeatable or something like that.
Okay. So, have there been any significant discoveries or observations made in the section?
Yes. As a matter of fact, just past year, Mercury sodium tail. It's now started to get imaged by amateur astronomers. Mercury doesn't have any atmosphere, but they do have Mercury does have the sodium molecules, and they scattered them above the surface. Now, being that it's close to the sun, the sodium molecules are pushed away from the solar winds, and from the distance, it looks like a comet, and you can see the tail, the sodium tail, from the distance. Now, if you use the sodium filter, which is isolated only on the sodium 589 nanometers, you're able to pick up the sodium light from Mercury, and you're able to make it out the tail, pointing away from the sun.
Right.
Yeah. I have posted this ALPO journal. You can see one of the members took the image of Mercury with the sodium tail and along with the crescent moon. It's a very impressive sight. So you need just a simple technique like a camera on the tripod and using the time exposure and using the filter, and you can able to image the sodium tail on a reasonable, maybe an hour after sunset or an hour before sunrise, with Mercury nearly the greatest elongation, which means the furthest away from the sun as possible. Yes, I mean now it opens up the new chapter of imaging Mercury now if you have a sodium filter.
Yeah, at this year's ALPO conference, you actually presented a paper on this.
Oh, yeah.
That's the first I had ever heard of a sodium tail on Mercury. That was amazing.
Yes, when I did a presentation last August, I posted this. I posted on my visual presentation, and a lot of people were amazing. And now you got the sodium tail that you can image with a simple camera on the tripod.
Yeah, those of you listening, if you're interested, you can go over to the ALPO YouTube channel, and the entire conference is available there on the YouTube channel, and you can see Frank's presentation where he does show us the tail of Mercury. It's pretty amazing.
Maybe, yeah. It's almost like equivalent to now you can image the dark side of Venus using the infrared filter.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So sodium filter. How much is a sodium filter for a telescope?
Well, Edmund scientific product, I think for a quarter of an inch, 1.5 quarter inch diameter. I think that go for $135.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Edmund.
Edmund. Okay, and that opens up a whole new type of observing too. So you're obviously interested in getting photographs of the sodium tail of Mercury as well.
Yes. Yeah. As a matter of fact, they were discovered by the spacecraft. I think Mariner 10 spacecraft, and confirmed by the messenger spacecraft. And from the distance, you can see the sodium tail. It's surrounded by sodium molecule on the surface, and what causes the tail is the solar winds.
Right.
And that it's so close to the sun, and it caused the tail to push away the sodium molecule by the solar wind, and from the distance, it looked like a comet.
That's very, very much. I mean, with the comet, you have the nucleus and the coma, which is the cloud around the nucleus, and the solar wind is what makes the tail, not the speed of the comet or anything like that.
Exactly.
It's the solar wind that gives the image of a tail. Interesting. Wow.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's never been done before by the amateur astronomer.
Well, you brought it to the forefront, and I'm sure there's people out there interested in doing it now.
Oh yeah, I planned to do a little write up on that. I mean, I mentioned briefly on my Mercury Section news, the fall issue. So I'm going to do a little more write up because I have more information, and hopefully, it will encourage people to try it out. So.
Okay. Well, talk to us about the current operation of Mercury.
Operation, yes. Okay. So Mercury just went through an inferior conjunction just a couple of days ago, October 9th, and now it's into the morning sky. Now that's going to be a very favorable apparition of the year, being that it's visible before sunset, before sunrise, because the ecliptic is very, very steep. So it's like it's pointing straight up against the horizon. So when Mercury nearly at the greatest elongation, which will occur on October 25th, it would stand 18 degrees above the sun, above the horizon, nearly at sunrise. So Mercury is pretty high up, and you're able to see Mercury very clearly with naked eye. And it would be bright enough if you have a telescope and follow it into the daylight hours, you can see Mercury really clearly as you get higher in the sky, assuming if you have a crystal blue sky. And that will be the best time to observe and trying to detect any detail on the surface. So Mercury will be visible much of late October into in November. After great elongation, October 25th, Mercury will be visible at least until mid-November, and we're still bright enough to be close to -1 magnitude, so it should be bright enough to be seen.
With Mercury being visible in the daytime too, it would be higher in the sky, which means the atmosphere would be less turbulent too. It's not closer to the horizon. That's a real advantage of observing Mercury in the middle of the day.
Yeah. Well, of course, you got to, you have to observe the safety rules.
Right.
Observing Mercury during the daytime, and make sure, like the telescope is in the shade, like the shade of the house or something like that, and you have a small window. Mercury will be outside of outside of the roof of the house, just to say, and Mercury will be visible at that moment before the sunlight comes out and hit the telescope. So is most of the time you find the atmosphere condition very, very still, very stabilized into the morning hours, even later morning hours, like late morning, like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock local time. You got to make sure that the telescope's in the shade, maybe the shade of the house, and you can observe. You have a very short window to observe Mercury before the sunlight comes out to hit the telescope. Then you have all the heat effects, turbulence.
Right.
So it has to be very quickly because it doesn't stray too far from the sun.
Right.
So you got to plan accordingly. That you got to make sure because every minute counts when you're trying to find it. When you're trying to focus, and if you want an image, you got to set it up. So every minute counts because it moves very quickly, and before the sunlight will interfere the observation.
Okay. All right. So where are the Mercury observations published?
Oh, okay. It publishes every year. It publishes in the Solar Astronomer.
Okay.
The ALPO, Association of Lunar Planetary Publication, and I publish it yearly, and you see all the reports of 1 year, or you see all the observers, how many observations of where they live, where they're located, and then you write about what you see for each apparition, like apparition 1, like in the morning sky or evening sky, and then apparition 2, 3, 4. Most of the time, it's about 6 to 7 apparitions a year. So I write about each one of them and get it published in the ALPO journal.
All right. So what do you see for the future of the Mercury section?
Hopefully, I continue as the Mercury coordinator, and hopefully I will try to attract more observer and any new things like the Siedentop this year, and look forward to another spacecraft that's heading to Mercury with the Pepso Colombo. It's a combination of Italian and European agency spacecraft. Will enter Mercury's orbit in 2025, which is about 4 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
And so hopefully we'll build new information. So look forward for that. And hopefully, many observers will improve their observing skills and imaging skills, and hopefully we'll get a more clear image of Mercury.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's been doing that almost every year. I proved myself the last 2 years. I proved myself in Mercury images. So it's got a lot better since when I first started 21 years ago.
Yeah, well, practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
So is there any additional information you'd like to share about the Mercury section?
Well, it's hopefully continue to send it in the observation, whether if you see anything or not. Even if you observe a crescent, that's pretty valuable. You can see how the phase changes from hep to crescent in the numbers of days.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty much valuable. You can see how quickly Mercury moves.
Right.
It's fun to it. It's a very challenging to observe Mercury. Don't forget, you're observing an image of Mercury is the most difficult object. Mercury has the reputation of the most difficult object to observe and to imaging. And
yeah, in my years of amateur astronomy, I believe I've only seen Mercury maybe 5 or 6 times.
Okay, yeah.
But those are the times. I mean, I looked for it and I found it. But that's the thing. It's just you got to know the right time of year, where it's going to be, because it's always going to be low on the horizon.
Yeah, even if you observe Mercury naked eye, that's pretty much satisfying, because you don't often see Mercury.
Right.
And especially during the planetary conjunction, it's more eye-catching to see Mercury when it's near Jupiter or Venus,
mm-hmm.
even the planet Saturn. And because they're much brighter, and then when you have a public viewing during the planetary conjunction, if it's Mercury involved, they're able to see Mercury nearby the planets,
mm-hmm.
like Venus and Jupiter, and they're able to see Mercury, and then they never see Mercury before.
That's true.
So there's more eye catching during the planetary conjunction than if Mercury was stand alone in the sky.
Very true. Very true. All right. Well, Frank, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast. I will put your contact information and links to the Mercury section in the show notes for everybody.
Yes. Yeah, just send it to me, frankj12@aol.com, my email address.
We'll do that.
Okay. And hopefully, you make it challenging.
Yeah. I hope we get a few Mercury observers listening to this podcast and submit their observations to you.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, Frank, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Okay. Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Observer's Notebook podcast. I again want to thank Frank Melilo for coming on and giving us a very enlightening discussion about observing the planet Mercury. Get out there and take a look. We upload a new episode of the Observer's Notebook every few weeks. You can subscribe to us on iTunes. If you do, please rate and review us. I really appreciate it. And you can also listen to us on Apple Radio, iHeartRadio, Soundcloud, Spreaker, Google Play, Stitcher, Amazon Echo, and Spotify. You can help support the podcast by donating to it via Patreon by giving up to $35 a month, where you'll receive 1 year's membership and producer credits on the podcast. And with that, I want to thank the producers of this podcast, Steve Siedentop and Michael Moyer, for their generous support of the Observer's Notebook. The link for Patreon, as well as the link for the ALPO, is in the show notes. You can contact me via email at commentman@commentman.net or on Twitter at ObserversNBpod. Until next time, my hope is you always have clear and steady skies. Thanks for listening.